Micah, the host of Shabbat Club, where good food, friends, and hosting comes together. I'm sharing my favorite Shabbat meals, cooking dinner for the people that I love the most. I'll be sharing tips, tricks, and my favorite ways to host. It's chaotic, it's messy, it's meaningful, and it's Shabbat Club. So grab a seat at my table and cook along. Today I am making one of my most favorite wintry main dishes. It is so cold here in Chicago and I hate it. I hate everything about it. But what I do love is a cozy dish. This is one of my favorite recipes from my book. I know I'm biased, whatever. It is red wine braised beets with creamy mamalika. If you don't know what mamalika is, no problem. It's essentially a really buttery polenta that comes from Romania. My grandmother's family was Romanian, and this is one thing that she could make really well. The other things, not so much. I love a vegetarian dish that just feels like it makes the vegetable shine. I don't want to disguise this. I just want to celebrate beets because beets are great for a winter dish. They're hearty, they're inexpensive, and it feels a little special to me. If you think you don't like beets, just think again. No problem. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to trim the ends of your beets. You want about 6 to 7. I had a couple extras in the fridge, so I'll be using all of these. A recipe is really just a guide. I'm going to trim those ends, and I'm going to cut them in half lengthwise this way. We will peel them once they're cooked. It makes it so much easier to do that. Beets are one of my favorite vegetables. They're so hearty, they're so sweet, and if you know how to make them, they're incredible. If you don't know how to make them, or if you've ever had them from like a can, less incredible. But we're gonna make these really flavorful beets with some red wine, sherry vinegar, shallots, ooh, that's ugly, and a bay leaf. If your beets came like beet greens, you can just cut those off and don't throw them out. Saute them with a little butter, with a little garlic, and you have a really nice side dish. You can also add them to soups or even smoothies. Anytime you see me in the kitchen, you might also see my dog. So if Buckwheat comes around, I'll show you my sweet boy, my firstborn child, Buckwheat. Everyone's gonna see Buckwheat. His big debut. All right, so I've got all my beets halved, which is great. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put them cut side down in a large skillet that is fitted with a lid. Let me just toss this. I'll deal with that later. Okay, so I've got a big skillet with a lid. I love having a clear lid so I can see what's going on, and I'm just going to arrange these guys over top. Cut side down. It doesn't have to be perfect. These guys are going to have a good simmer for quite some time. I forgot to cut that one. When I'm hosting, my first question is always, what are your dietary requirements? It is such an important question to ask because some people might be vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, allergic to nuts, allergic to X, Y, or Z. So knowing what people can and can't eat is so important, and it also helps them feel more comfortable eating at your house. I have someone coming to Shabbat this week that's allergic to cashews and pistachios and gluten, so actually this is the perfect recipe for them. Oh, and dairy, and this is going to be vegan. What makes this such a flavorful dish is what we're going to simmer it with. So I'm using wine. I know that there are all these opinions about which wines to use when cooking, and someone says, don't cook with the wine you'd want to drink, but I am not going to waste the wine I want to drink cooking. So I got a cheap and cheerful $10 bottle from the grocery store, and that is as good as it's going to get today. Okay, so I've got some red wine, about 1.5 cups, and then I'm also going to put some veggie broth or water. So I've got a 1/2 cup of veggie broth. Ooh, that smells like something I wouldn't want to drink, but I'll still get the flavor I want, if you know what I mean. And a 1/4 cup. I'm going to put this in my fridge for future recipes, or if I get really desperate, let's be honest. To this, I'm also going to add a shallot that I'll just quarter really quickly and peel. Shallots are like a cousin to the red onion. They're a little less spicy, and I really like using them. Also, if you're cooking for yourself and you don't want to have leftover onion or something like that, a shallot's kind of like a nice option so that you don't have to waste a full onion, or like use like a 1/4 of it. You could use about 1 shallot for every 1/4 of a red onion. Easy as that. So I've just quartered that. I've got a bay leaf, a sprig of rosemary, stunning. And some salt. That's my dog. He's the worst. Okay, so this is on high and we're gonna let it come to a boil. And then we'll cover it and let it simmer for about 40 to 50 minutes until these beets get irresistibly tender. While this is happening, we can make our polenta, but this is an awesome thing to do in advance. You don't have to do this all at once. You could do this the day before. So it makes making Shabbat meals a little easier when you know what can rest and what can stay in the fridge and what freezes and defrosts beautifully. And this is one of those dishes that does that. So let's let this come to a boil. These have started to boil, so I'll put the lid on and we'll let it come to a simmer, reducing the heat slightly for about 40 to 50 minutes until we can pierce the beets with a knife or a fork. Easy as that. I'm going to move this so that it's not in our way. Next up is the mamalika. So mamalika is kind of like polenta's cousin, but I think it's better. It's richer, it's full of butter, it's full of creaminess. It is something that my grandmother could make really well, but her secret was just using all of the butter she had. So I think anything with that much butter would be delicious, but you do you. Okay, so all we need is hot on here. Our polenta. Polenta is not the same as cornmeal. It's coarser, so you can't use necessarily cornmeal that you used for, I don't know, a cornbread as polenta. It's a little coarser. Add that here. We have some milk. I'm using a non-dairy oat milk because I have some non-dairy friends coming. This is one dish that I make pretty frequently at home. It's one of my favorites. And 2 cups water. Sorry. Okay, so we're gonna get our water and our milk all boiling together, as well as salt. This is something that I make pretty frequently in the winter. It's so hearty. Just this with some like roasted cabbage on top with a little bit of sauce and some herbs is so delicious. It's really one of the simplest and most humble dishes out there, but it carries so much heartiness and for me, a lot of meaning because my grandmother used to eat this. So I'll give this a good mix. What you really want to do is whisk the polenta a lot. Don't shy from whisking. You can't over whisk it. Under whisking can cause it to just be a little clumpy and sad. We don't want that. If you have someone coming over that's gluten-free, this is a great meal for them. This is gluten-free because we're using polenta. There's no other grains in there. Make sure you're using a gluten-free non-dairy milk alternative if you need to. And then the beets, of course, are just wine, vinegar, water, broth. Make sure it's gluten-free if you need it to be. Rosemary, bay leaf, shallot, that's it. And so it's a really nice way to include everyone at the table. I really started doing what I do now because I was the only vegetarian at the table for so many years in my family and no one really knew what to do with me. And that was so frustrating. And so I decided when my grandmother passed actually in 2018 that I wanted to reopen and reimagine what our holiday table could look like. And so I started focusing my work on Jewish cuisine, because I always felt like I didn't have a seat at the table when I was just eating side dishes. Of course, I was always welcome and my family always wanted me there, but there was always a part of me that felt like I couldn't participate fully if I couldn't eat the food that was there. Because in my family, your Jewishness was related to your plate and you couldn't separate one from the other. And so I started to think about how can we make our tables more inclusive to those who eat differently, whether you're gluten-free, live a vegetarian lifestyle, vegan, nut allergy to this and that, you deserve a spot. And don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. So this dish, perfection for all of those things. Let's give it a good mix. A lot of whisking. It's going to start to thicken. Eventually, it'll start to thicken. Something that I did recently was move. If you've ever moved, you know how difficult this is. Moving is so hard. And I'm not talking a move from one neighborhood to the next. I'm talking 3 continents, No. 3 continents?
No.
Countries. I'm confused. 2 continents, 3 countries, 5 cities in less than 10 years. That's aggressive. I started my journey, way back when in Western Canada, and I've lived all across Canada, went to school in the US, and I was living in Toronto where I met my now husband. After a few years in Toronto, his work moved us to London, UK. After about 2 years there, his work moved us to San Diego, California. That was during COVID, so before you say, why would you ever leave? It's pretty easy to leave a place where you've been stuck inside all the time, and so we left. Then we went to San Francisco and now to Chicago. So we've been in Canada, the US, and the UK, all within these years. And when we moved to the Chicago area last year, I was like, my goodness, how am I going to make friends again? I'm so exhausted. But thankfully, Shabbat was on my side. Moving here, I knew one person, literally one. And I said, I don't want to make friends again. I'm so tired. And she got it. She gets it. She's a mom. She's hopefully going to come on and cook with me one day. And we decided to create a Shabbat club together. One that focused on community over clout, connection over dating, and one for women to get together and just chat. Especially as a mom and someone who's looking for friends to go to Costco with, I really wanted a space where I could feel like I could just be me. And Shabbat is always the place that I've felt the most comfortable. It's where I've always brought people in together to make friends, to make that community, and to build a village where I don't have one. When you've moved as much as I have and we have as a family, you start to realize how badly you need that village. And it is really hard to make it. But the place that felt the most natural and organic for me to do that was at my dinner table, because I have a toddler. And inviting people out to dinner with a toddler, I have to get a babysitter. I have to make sure he's ready. If you're going out to eat with your toddler, it's chaos. How do you actually form a connection when you're trying to wrangle a screaming kid? When you have them at home, it can feel more intimate. Your kid can play and go to bed at his normal time. And you can have a deeper conversation when you're not being interrupted by a waiter. Plus, eating out's really expensive. So I started to invite people to my house for Shabbat. It started with our neighbors. A neighbor comes over for Shabbat and make a nice meal. We have a connection. Lovely. Another neighbor comes over, and another, and another, and another. And soon, a neighbor saying, I haven't come over yet. Can I come? And they're starting to ask to come to the house. And I love that. So being able to invite people into your home is so special. And I will say, yes, I love to cook. I love to make the food myself, but you don't need to. You could do this exact same thing, ordering pizza in. It's totally up to you. It could be a potluck. It could be a cook the book situation. Don't feel like you have to make everything perfect in order for people to come over, because they'll appreciate the company even more than the food. Okay, I neglected my whisking duties. Oh dear. So it's a little lumpy, but we'll get through it. Giving that a good whisk so it's starting to thicken slightly. It'll need another minute or two. So our polenta is getting nice and thick, which is perfect. And now we're going to add a little bit of vegan butter. If you eat dairy, feel free to add a dairy butter. But we're going vegan today because of who's coming to dinner. We're going to add a little bit of that. And I really want this to get nice and rich and savory, because typically this would be made with butter and cheese and cream. So I really want to be able to still get that richness. One of my favorite ways to do that is using tahini. This is one of my favorite brands. It's called Soom. It is a woman-owned brand in out of Philadelphia. They're amazing. They're so sweet. And this is one of my favorite ingredients to use. I go through this stuff like water. So I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of tahini. Maybe a little bit more than that. Tablespoon is a loose term in this house, I guess. I do feel like there are certain things you really don't have to measure. One of them is vanilla, another garlic, and apparently also tahini. The next ingredient we're gonna add is nutritional yeast. Nutritional yeast is one of my most used items in my vegetarian kitchen. It gives like a really savory, almost cheesy flavor, which I love. I love cheese. And it's actually really good for you. It's full of protein, B vitamins. This on popcorn is probably the best thing that ever happened to the universe. Mark my words. And I'm always going to be, I don't know, maybe 3-4 tablespoons of that in there. This is another thing I don't measure when I'm cooking with love. I don't measure this. I'll tell you that much for free. Give this a good mix. Before serving, I am going to hit this with some black pepper. Simple as that. In the meantime, it can just sit on the stove and you can reheat it. So you can make this a little in advance. Just reheat it and loosen it with either some water, vegetable broth, or milk. So I'm going to use my oat milk to reheat it because it will thicken. Right now, it's so nice and creamy and smooth, but it will thicken and solidify slightly. You can see. So right before, you want to just make sure you loosen it up a little. The nutritional yeast just gives it so much depth. Absolutely love, 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 love. And honestly, I'll probably reheat this with a little bit of butter because it's delicious. Okay, this guy's ready. Let's check on our beets. All right, let's check. Ready for the steam? Ah! Stunning. Well, it smells great. That rosemary and bay leaf is really coming through. Perfect. They're nice and fork tender, meaning I can pierce them with a fork or a knife. We're going to remove these and then let them cool. This is why you can make this in advance, because there are so many spots where it just has to cool and do its thing, and beets are really hardy, so they won't really break down. I'm also going to remove the rosemary and shallots and bay leaf because this is going to be reduced into a sauce. When I say reduced, I mean that we're going to reduce it by half in volume, so we're not going to have a ton, but it's going to get nice and thick. We're going to have some of that flavor and color from the beets. And we're also going to add a splash of maple syrup because I'm Canadian. Duh. A splash of maple, about 2 tablespoons. And some vinegar. I say sherry vinegar, I'm out, but I'm going to use red wine vinegar. No problem. About a 1/4 cup. I want this to be nice and tangy. 1/4 cup-ish. Measuring with the heart, you know? So we're going to let this come to a boil and really reduce. That's the goal of this. And while that does that, I'm going to start peeling my beets. These are still a little bit hot, so do as I say, not as I do. So give yours some time to cool a little. Oh, that's hot. But me, I've got little leather fingers from years and years of burning myself, which is somewhat problematic. Okay, so we're going to start to peel these. I like to use a little paring knife. You could even use a vegetable peeler, whatever you like. And because they're hot, I'm just going to hold it with a little bit of that paper towel. It's a lot simpler to peel this way. And then I'll just toss these skins. Now, I'll also say that the softer the beet, the easier it is to peel, and you can even get it to a point where you could like wipe it off almost with a paper towel or even tin foil, which is nice. These ones are still a little bit more solid, I'll say. I don't know what the right word to use there would be. Solid, hard. Oh my goodness. It's one of those weeks where it feels like it's been a week of Mondays, you know? But thankfully, Shabbat means the end of the week and the start of relaxation in the weekend. Although if you're a parent, you know that the weekend is sometimes harder than the week because there's no school or daycare and you're shuttling your kid from one place to the next. But we're all having a good time, right? We're all having a good time. So I'll peel these beets. You can't really do this with pre-peeled or pre-cooked beets. It just won't have the same amount of flavor. And they probably start to break down a little bit. But if you do try it with some of those pre-peeled vacuum packed beets, please let me know because that would probably save everyone a lot of time. I find that I use polenta / mamalika for a lot of my Shabbat meals. Like I mentioned, gluten-free, kind of easy to make, easy to prep ahead, delicious. But what I also like is that it just makes a really nice base for whatever you're serving. So while I make these beets frequently, I often will make like our smoky roasted mushrooms with white beans to go on top as well. Maybe some braised cabbage to go on there, or squash or sweet potatoes. So it's just a really nice way to present a dish. And whenever I'm planning a Shabbat menu, the first thing I ask about is allergies, intolerances, things you don't like. But then I start to frame it, okay, so I need one source of protein. That could be beans in our house because we're a vegetarian house. It could be cheese. It could be something with eggs, soy like a tofu or a tempeh. And then I want to think of one starch. So my starch this week is my mama liga. And then I like a cooked vegetable and a raw vegetable. So my beets will be my cooked vegetable. And my raw vegetable is always going to be like a nice seasonal salad. And that's about it. So that's about 4-ish dishes. I think in a vegetarian one, you could sometimes get away with a few more because things are a little lighter, but certainly that's all you really need. So for this one, I'll probably also make some sort of bean dish or add beans to my raw vegetable salad to get a little bit of protein, or add some cheese on the side for anyone who wants to add it in. But that's really my formula of a cooked veg, a raw veg, a starch, and a protein. Now that your hands are all red. That's hot. That's hot. Let me grab this. At home, you wouldn't do without a hot plate, right? I'm going to put my beets back in, and we're going to let this come to another boil. Great. Make sure those are submerged. It's going to really absorb the rest of that sauce. Now that it has a new layer to do that with, soften slightly. We're going to toss it to coat. I'm going to put it on this plate. I love how this looks on an oval platter. And anytime I'm hosting, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 people, I think of what I'm making and I say, okay, what would this look nice on? And I think that this dish looks great on an oval for some reason. So again, a smaller portion, so I'll probably use just half of this because it's a smaller group this week. But I'm going to pile my mama liga on here, make some divots with a spoon so that my beets kind of nestle in and that sauce really flows. This dish, I can't remember if it's from my grandmother or my husband's grandmother, but we inherited it a few years ago, and it's really one of my favorite little dishes to even make a pickle plate on. But something like this, even though it's tarnished and imperfect, shows that Shabbat is not new for us. Shabbat is something that we're doing because of the people that passed it down to us. So I like to incorporate a little bit of that heritage into my plating. So let's plate. Give this a nice little mix. Beautiful. I did have to loosen it slightly with a little bit more oat milk because it was getting a little bit thick as we were waiting for that, but that's totally fine. It doesn't really impact the taste. It really just helps to loosen it again. So I'm going to start by just taking a couple spoonfuls of this, putting it on my plate. I've already made a small mess. That's fine. I'm going to eat that. Ugh. I love mama liga. So good. Let's put on this. Spread it out a bit. Do you see how creamy that is? Stunning. Stunning. Then once our beets are done, then I'll just pile them right on top of this and it will be perfection. The mama liga is just so creamy. Look at that. Ugh, stunning. Stunning. My beets are looking great. I'm going to start to transfer them over into my mama liga dish. The contrast of the yellow and the red. I don't develop recipes based on what things look like, but it's something I definitely think about because I want my table to look beautiful and I want it to feel inviting and warm and exciting. And especially if someone's not a vegetarian themselves, I want them to rethink about what veggies can be like. And so if I can change their mind and say, you know what, veggies are hearty and filling and exciting, then maybe they'll be interested in adding a few more vegetable dishes or vegetarian dishes to their life as well, which is probably something we could all benefit from. So I'll just plate this. I like to arrange my little beets all over. Look at that stunning red sauce. Amazing. Arranging that on there. And then I'll get a little bit of sauce on here as well. Amazing. I'm so excited to be able to dig into this with my friends. I'm going to hit it with a ton of black pepper. I meant a lot. Also, like, buy good black pepper. It makes a difference. And a little bit of sauce. So let me turn this off. Let me move this closer to myself. Do you ever just, like, makes things way harder than they need to be? Go. So you can see I put my spoon in the sauce, and if I run my finger down, it keeps that channel. That's how you know it's ready, okay? So I'm just gonna scoop some of that sauce. It's almost like there's none left, which is what you want because you were really concentrating that flavor to almost make like a syrup. Put a little bit over top. I like to garnish with a little fresh rosemary, similar to like what's inside of it. Stunning. My friends are really gonna love this. This is also one of my husband's favorite dishes. He also has Romanian ancestry. Just comfort food at its finest. And just like letting these veggies do what they do best, which is be delicious. This is a perfect entree for my Shabbat club. It's vegetarian, it's vegan, it's gluten-free, and it's just delicious. Plus, you can make most of it in advance so that you don't have to worry when your friends come over. Because the worst part about hosting is the stress that comes with it. So it's my job, I think, to alleviate some of that stress. Should we taste it? Most likely. I'll use a clean spoon, don't worry. Ugh. I honestly might not want to share this. That's the problem. Let's take one of the beets from here so I don't ruin my plate. Sweet, sour, earthy, hearty. There's a reason why I keep coming back to this dish. I love it. Thanks for coming to my Shabbat club. If you're in my area, shoot me a message because you are always welcome at my table. I will even serve you the good wine. Shabbat shalom.